There was a moment in the 1990s when going out to eat felt like an event. Not just a meal, an event. You remember the gorillas, the movie props, the sizzling fajita platter that made every head in the room turn. Those restaurants had something that is almost impossible to explain now. A feeling that the evening actually mattered. Most of them are gone. And the strangest part is that almost nobody talks about them anymore. If you ever walked into a Rainforest Cafe, you heard it before you saw it. The low rumble of thunder somewhere above the ceiling, the sudden dimming of lights, and then the storm, animatronic gorillas stirring in the trees, mist rolling through the jungle canopy, the whole room shaking for about 30 seconds, while children grabbed their parents, and nobody quite knew whether to laugh or run. It happened every 20 minutes. Whether you were ready or not. The menu was secondary. The food was fine. What you were really paying for was the feeling of sitting inside something alive. Rainforest Cafe still exists, a handful of locations at Disney Springs and Las Vegas. But the one in your mall, the one that made an ordinary Saturday feel like an expedition, that one is gone. And somehow, almost nobody brings it up anymore. Not every 90s restaurant was trying to feed you. Some were trying to impress you. Planet Hollywood opened in New York in 1991, and within a few years there were locations in cities across the country, each one packed with movie props behind glass, costumes from films you had actually seen, and a noise level that made conversation almost impossible. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and Bruce Willis had their names attached to it, which at the time felt like the most 90s thing imaginable. What most people did not know was that the celebrities never actually invested cash. They traded memorabilia and appearances for stock options, but you were not really there for the food, and everyone knew it. You were there because it felt like being somewhere. At its peak, there were around 90 locations worldwide. Today, there are 7. And when was the last time you heard anyone mention it? Chi-Chi's was the kind of place that hit you before you even sat down. The smell of sizzling meat, the sound of a skillet coming through the dining room, and then that moment when the fajita platter arrived at the table. A loud hiss, columns of smoke rising up. Every head in the restaurant turning to look. Chi-Chi's brought Tex-Mex to the suburbs at a time when most families had never tasted a fajita, and for a lot of people it was the first Mexican restaurant they ever walked into. The birthday sombrero was a ritual. The fried ice cream was a revelation. It ended suddenly in 2003, the way things that feel permanent always do, not slowly, but all at once. And just recently, someone licensed the name and opened one new location in Minnesota, because apparently some things are too loved to stay gone. Nobody planned to eat at Sbarro. You were already in the mall, already hungry, and there it was. That wide orange slice sitting under the heat lamp. The smell of pizza drifting down the food court before you had even made a decision. Sbarro did not advertise. It did not need to. It had real estate. At its peak, there were over 1,000 locations, almost all of them inside shopping malls. And for a decade, that meant it was everywhere. What most people never knew was that Sbarro started as something else entirely. A small Italian delicatessen opened in Brooklyn in 1956 by a family from Naples. By the time the malls took over, that origin was long forgotten. You just pointed at the slice and handed over a few dollars. Nobody chose Sbarro. Sbarro chose you, and somehow that was always enough. But wait until you hear what happened to the next one. Kenny Rogers. Roasters was built around a smell. You could catch it from the parking lot. Wood-fired rotisserie chicken turning slowly behind the counter, warm and smoky in a way that felt less like fast food and more like someone's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. Kenny Rogers himself co-founded the chain in 1991, and at its peak there were over 350 locations across the country. The whole thing felt wholesome. Honest food, reasonable prices, nothing trying too hard. Then in 1996, a Seinfeld episode put a giant glowing red Kenny Rogers neon sign directly into Kramer's apartment window. and suddenly the chain was famous for something it never asked for. What almost nobody knows is that the episode was inspired by a real lawyer in New York who hung a sign outside his office window that read, "Bad food," to protest the heat and grease coming up through his floor. Kenny Rogers Roasters filed for bankruptcy in 1998. The last American location closed in 2011. The neon still glows somewhere, just not here. Lone Star Steakhouse gave you permission to make a mess. There were buckets of peanuts on every table, and the floor was covered in shells, yours and everyone else's who had sat there before you. That was the point. The whole place felt like Texas decided to throw a party and forgot to clean up afterward. Neon signs, wooden booths, the smell of mesquite coming off the grill. And then, without warning, the music would change, and every server in the building would stop what they were doing and break into a choreographed country line dance right there between the tables. Nobody expected it, but nobody ever forgot it either. It lost ground slowly to Texas Roadhouse and Outback, the way a lot of good things lose, not in one moment, but across 100 small ones. The last location in the continental United States closed in 2019. There is one still open. It is in Guam. Boston Market was not really a restaurant. It was a solution. It was 1993. Both people in the household were working. Dinner still needed to happen, and nobody had time to cook. You pulled into the parking lot and walked out 10 minutes later with a whole rotisserie chicken, cornbread that tasted like it came out of somebody's grandmother's oven, and sweet potato casserole in a heavy, black plastic container that stayed warm the whole drive home. It felt like cheating in the best possible way. The company grew so fast in the 90s that it could not keep up with itself, and the people who believed in it most got hurt the most. McDonald's bought what was left in 2000. The cornbread is still there in theory, but the version that made an ordinary Tuesday feel like a home-cooked meal, the one you actually remember, that one has been gone for a long time. And this next one had the strangest ending of all. Bennigan's felt like a neighborhood pub that had somehow ended up in every suburb in America. Dark wood paneling, brass rails along the bar, old photographs on the walls that looked like they had been there for decades, even when the location had just opened. It was the kind of place you went on a weeknight without making a plan, after work, after errands, when nobody felt like cooking and nobody wanted anything complicated. Bennigan's was actually the first chain to bring happy hour drink specials to the American suburbs, which sounds like a small thing until you realize how much of the 1990s social life happened around that idea. The menu had a lot of options, but everyone ordered the Monte Cristo turkey ham and cheese, dipped in batter, deep fried, dusted with powdered sugar, served with a side of jam. It should not have worked. It absolutely worked. In 2008, the corporate office filed for bankruptcy and closed every company-owned location overnight. No warning. Fewer than 10 Bennigans remain in the entire country. The Monte Cristo went with them. Sizzler was the place where the salad bar was the main event. You paid for a steak and spent 20 minutes at the salad bar first. Pasta salad, jello, sunflower seeds, ranch dressing, soft serve at the end if you still had room. The steak was fine. The cheese toast was better than the steak. It arrived on a small red tray, thick cut, warm and gooey. And most people will tell you it was the best thing on the menu. Sizzler had hundreds of locations across the country in the 90s, and most people assumed it would always be there. Then the casual dining market shifted, the salad bar era quietly ended, and the locations started disappearing one by one. In 1991, long before any of that, the company had produced a 4-minute promotional video that treated the salad bar like a civil right. Slow-motion families, a soaring choir, sweeping shots of America that somehow ended at the sneeze guard. It was made for franchise owners, not the public. When it leaked online decades later, nobody could quite believe it was real. A few Sizzler locations still exist on the West Coast. The cheese toast is still there. Some things survive. If your family wanted a steak dinner without the steak dinner price, Ponderosa was the answer. You walked in, ordered at the counter, and then the salad bar opened up in front of you, like a decision you were not prepared to make. Iceberg lettuce, cottage cheese, Jell-O in 4 colors. Soft serve at the end, with the little handle you pumped yourself. The steak came out on a metal tray, and it was exactly what it was: affordable, hot, and satisfying in the way that things are when you are not expecting anything more than what you asked for. Ponderosa and Bonanza were actually rivals for years, 2 separate chains fighting over the same middle American family dinner, named after the same legendary TV Western. They ended up under the same ownership in the late 90s without most people noticing, and not long after that, the buffet era ended and took most of them with it. The salad bar still exists somewhere. The soft serve handle probably still works. But nobody really talks about it anymore, and maybe that is the strangest part of all. Ground Round was the restaurant that trusted you. There were peanut shells on the floor because you put them there. Old movies played on the walls while you ate. And on certain nights, kids stepped onto a scale near the entrance and paid for their meal by the pound. A penny for every pound they weighed. 60 pounds meant 60 cents. It was a completely ridiculous idea, and everyone loved it. The ice cream came out in miniature plastic baseball helmets, 1 for each team. And if you were lucky, you got your team, and if you did not, you ate it anyway because it was ice cream in a tiny helmet, and that was enough. In 2004, the corporate office sent a mass fax to every franchise, ordering them to close immediately. Not at the end of the week, not at the end of the day. Immediately. There were people still sitting at tables. There were workers who showed up the next morning to lock doors. That was it. No announcement. No goodbye, just a fax. These places are gone now, or close enough to being gone, that it amounts to the same thing. But if any of them brought something back, a smell, a table, a night you had not thought about in years, leave it in the comments. Someone else remembers it too. Sometimes you do not miss the food. You miss who you were when you were eating it. If you have not subscribed yet, there's a lot more still to remember.